Welcome to the Sherborne Podcast. It's the second week of Stay at Home Sherborne. Don't go to work unless your job's essential and can't be done at home. Don't travel unless you're going to or from your essential job, or you're going out to buy essential food supplies or medicines. When you get to the shops, stand outside in a single file, at least 2 metres from others in the queue. Don't have friends round. Don't go outside except to exercise once a day. The restrictions the government's imposing on daily life would have been unthinkable a few short weeks ago. So how is Sherborne coping with the 2020 COVID-19 emergency? The Sherborne Podcast has been finding out.
This last week we've seen the first people die from this horrible virus in West Dorset.
Give it another 3 weeks and what are you going to say then? Because actually I can see the lockdown getting tighter.
Little acts of kindness that make people's day are incredible.
Stay at home, protect our NHS and save lives.
As long as we're fit and healthy, we will keep going. It's tricky times, it's hard times.
The most draconian restrictions ever imposed on people in England in modern times are being enforced by the police. New guidance is going out to police officers following criticism of heavy-handed actions by some forces in other parts of the country. The Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset, Martin Underhill, says he believes they've got it right locally.
I'm reasonably happy in Dorset if you look at all the media stories. None of them revolve around Dorset. Most of them are Midlands or up north. The Derbyshire thing has got a bit out of control, to be honest. The whole thing about putting dye in a beauty spot, that's done every year anyway. That was nothing to do with coronavirus, so that was the media going a little bit off the wall. But there's bound to be examples where police officers misinterpret the law or are a little bit too keen on the law. But what I would say to everybody is remember two things. The police haven't been trained in doing this. I've been in policing 40 years. No one's ever had to do this. There are bound to be inconsistencies and there are bound to be teething problems, and I'll just ask people to bear with that.
How do you think the restrictions are being observed in Dorset by the public?
Roughly 95% of people are complying completely. We have the few exceptions, and you will have seen those in the media. The gentleman who wanted to drive to the coast and use his jet ski and then refuse requests to come off the jet ski. And the lady who was driving around Bourne was saying, I'm doing this because I can. They're two good examples where people have been arrested or fined. But actually, I give huge thanks to the people of Sherborne and to the people of Dorset because people are complying. And that's really important because at the end of the day, we police by consent. We are the only unarmed police force in Europe. This civil emergency, if you like, is not something we're used to as a police force, and we're certainly not used to it as a society. So the fact that 95% are complying is really, really useful, and I say thank you to everybody who's listening. I would also say that was about 90% this time last week, and that's because government guidelines weren't clear enough. There were too many inconsistencies over beauty spots and travelling to beauty spots, and too many inconsistencies over second houses. We had lots of people coming down from London thinking they could come to their second home in Dorset for the weekend. So the government have clarified that. They've put out new guidance, which you can find on the gov.uk website. And that's removed some of the inconsistency and some of the confusion. So I think we're now settling into a battle rhythm, and I think we're here for several weeks.
The Commissioner dismisses criticism from retired Supreme Court Justice Lord Sumption, who says the police are exceeding their powers under the emergency legislation. Mr Underhill warns even stricter measures may be necessary soon.
Lord Sumption is known for being controversial, and he's certainly been controversial over this. Every country in Europe is doing what Britain's doing. As I just said, we are the only unarmed policing by consent force in the world. And we aren't losing that. This is a very short-term emergency power. And my reply to Lord Sumption would be, one, I think you're wrong. Two, we're doing this to save lives, and that has to be the top priority. And three, give it another 3 weeks, and what are you going to say then? Because actually I can see the lockdown getting tighter. I could see a curfew coming in, which we've got in various other countries, as we hit the peak.
And what will that mean for relationships between the police and the public then?
Well, at the moment, relationships are excellent, and because people appreciate the position the police have been put into. My concern, the Chief Constable's concern, is if we reach the peak and we do go to more power, curfew or whatever, which the Civil Contingency Act does allow, that will be just the time when the police force is losing probably 20 to 25% of its workforce. So these are difficult times, very difficult times for Dorset Police and very difficult times for the country.
Now, one of your responsibilities is setting the police budget. What impact is the crisis going to have on other police priorities?
A really interesting question. So I'm speaking to the Policing Minister and the Home Secretary at 4 o'clock today, and I'm doing that to discuss money. For example, Dorset Police is recruiting or absorbing 100 new staff. They were people who were police officers or police staff who have retired in the last 5 years. They're coming back into the organisation as we speak to cope with this resilience issue. But there's no budget for those people. And that's about £3 or £4 million that we haven't got. So I am speaking to ministers this afternoon. To be fair, if you look at what the government have done for the NHS, if you look at what the government have done for the self-employed and the employed, they have stepped up to the plate totally. And I have no doubt whatsoever they'll step up to the plate financially for policing.
So you're expecting the government to provide more funds?
Yes, I am. Well, I have to quite frankly. Dorset has been running on air for the last 2 years. We haven't got any more reserves to pull in. So, we will be in serious financial difficulty if the government don't step up.
One of the things that people in Sherborne have noticed over the last week or so that this has been going on is the visible police patrols in the town every day, several times a day. Can we have that level of service when we return to ordinary times?
Unlikely in the short term, likely in the medium term. The reason you're seeing so visible police presence is that crime and demand has dropped by about 20%. We don't have a nighttime economy in Dorset anymore. We don't have violence happening outside pubs at 11 o'clock on a Friday night because all the pubs are shut. So the crime trajectory, the crime demographic has changed, allowing us to put more police officers and police staff on the streets. When the civil emergency ends, the demand will go back up and policing will have to go back to where it was. The reason I said in the medium term Sherborne will see more people is because of the government uplift, and I spoke to the Policing Minister last Wednesday and he was adamant that the uplift, the 3-year uplift, is still going to happen. So we've had 50 officers already hit Dorset, 29 arrived yesterday, you probably saw that in the press. We have another 70 next year and 50 the year after. That is what will allow Sherborne to see more visible policing.
And finally, do you have a message for the public in Sherborne?
I've only got one message for anybody, including the people of Sherborne, which is stay safe, protect the NHS and save lives.
Sherborne's MP, Chris Loader, returned to his home in the town at the weekend. He told me he's been impressed by the way people in Sherborne have come together to help their neighbours in the crisis.
I think it's been absolutely amazing, Phil, the number of people who've come forward and volunteered to help, whether that's local residents, whether that's the local shops down through Cheap Street. The initiative of Sherborne Viral Kindness, the initiative from the Sherborne Independence Group. I mean, it's just been absolutely amazing. And of course, it puts it in stark contrast, doesn't it, when you walk down through Cheap Street and you see, the signs in the shop windows saying that the shops are closed because of, government advice until further notice. It's really quite sad to see that, but there is some really, really wonderful community initiatives coming out of this, and it's so pleased to see it.
How do you think the town's going to emerge from the crisis? Is it inevitable we're going to lose some of those businesses you've just walked past?
I really hope not, Phil. I mean, this is really, really difficult times, and pretty much all of the shops, I think, except for Oxford's Bakery on Cheap Street, are closed at the moment. I think people are realising the true value of our local shops through this crisis. It's clear that some of the supermarkets are are really struggling to deliver. Some of their supply chains are not quite working as they would hope, and I think people are turning back to local shops, whether it's the butchers, the bakers, and the smaller shops, much more now than ever. So I really do hope that there is a silver lining of this cloud.
Do you think the government's done enough?
I think the government has done a phenomenal amount. Far in excess of my expectations. That's not to say that there are some people who are still in need and support, and all my time at the moment is spent supporting those people who need that extra help, whether that's financially from the government, or whether that's supplies and the like. That's where my time is spent.
How do you think people are coping with the restrictions placed upon them by the emergency? Do you think the government's action is proportionate?
I do think the government's action is proportionate. I think the government has needed to minimise the spread of this virus, which can be very, very, very unpleasant. I think people are increasing locally here in and around Sherborne. I think people are dealing with it very, very well. Of course, we've only really just got past the first week, so there's still quite a long way to go. Though I think it's fair to say that some people nearer the coast have probably ventured a little bit further than they ought to have done, and it resulted in not this weekend just past, but the one before. I went on the news and made various statements calling for people to be sensible and not to travel from afar, and actually to stay at home or in the vicinity of their homes, simply because we were seeing scenes on the seaside at Bridport, on the Jurassic Coast, and at Lyme Regis that you would have thought it was a summer Saturday afternoon. And that really was not a good thing to do. But
what about people who live in Sherborne who just want to drive just a couple of miles out of town to walk their dogs or take their exercise? Should they be allowed to do that?
No, I would love to be able to do that, but we've got to bear in mind what we're faced with here. People need to stay at home, and they need to stay within the vicinity of their home, and that doesn't include driving out of town, whether it's for your dog or otherwise. Of course, if people are going to help vulnerable people, or they're dropping off shopping or prescriptions, that's slightly different. But you see, if people start to congregate and meet together in one place, not necessarily planned, it does increase the risk. And this last week, we've seen the first people die from this horrible virus in West Dorset, and we need to make sure that we minimise that risk. And I know it's not a great thing to do to have to stay in, but I'm afraid that is what we absolutely have to do.
Chris, it's barely 3 months since you became an MP. You're witnessing firsthand how the nation copes with this unprecedented health emergency. I bet that's not what you expected.
I think you're quite right. It was definitely not what I expected. Being elected to Parliament only just over 3 months ago, I thought we were going to have the most important vote before Christmas, which was about leaving the European Union. I certainly didn't see for one moment that we would, within 3 months, have legislation brought before Parliament that that goes to the extent which the Coronavirus Act goes, in terms of giving the government and the police and other authorities powers in order to manage the coronavirus. It was just unthinkable. And the first 3.5 months have been pretty full on as it is. Without this, but it's very clear now that this takes the absolute priority. And I, as the parliamentary representative of the people of West Dorset, am acting not only in the best interests of West Dorset, but in the interest of the country, by supporting this legislation, even though it doesn't always sit comfortable with me. But where we are is that we've absolutely got to do this in the interests of ourselves, of our family and friends, and our neighbours.
Do you hope that legislation will be reviewed regularly?
Well, it will be. So one of the representations I made to the government about the legislation was that whereas the government had initially proposed that legislation would have a sunset clause in it, so that's basically where it automatically switches out after 2 years. I wanted to make sure that we had regular review, so I was very pleased that after my representations, that legislation will now be reviewed in Parliament every 6 months.
And finally, how are you coping with the stay-at-home requirements?
Well, I came home last week from Westminster. When we started to see the coronavirus issue emerge, straight away my team started to work from home. I directed them to all work from home. That was probably a couple of weeks ago now, and that was to minimise any risk to them and to others. I, of course, had to stay in Westminster because of my responsibilities in Parliament, which are very, very important. And there's no time of greater importance, should I say, to hold the government to account when we are in these sorts of these times, if you like. Coming back to Sherborne actually has been refreshing in many ways. Different in some ways, in terms of staying in. I mean, I'm staying in the house pretty much most of the time, unless I've got to go to the shops or the chemist to pick up anything. I'm very pleased that I haven't had any symptoms or anything like that, and I'm fit and well, and hope to continue doing as much as I possibly can to help people, which is our priority locally at the moment, because we're doing lots to help those who particularly are abroad and needing help with repatriation at the moment. We are dealing a lot with our GP surgeries and our chemists or our pharmacists at the moment to make sure that they've got what they need, and that work will be done from here. So it's a bit different. I'm not used to being stuck indoors, but I look at it slightly differently. I don't look at it as though we're stuck indoors. I look at it as though we are safer indoors for the time being, and I think that's the approach that we all need to take.
You're listening to the Sherborne Podcast and how the coronavirus is affecting the town. Next, what the lockdown means for one business and how Sherborne's traders have come together to help the vulnerable.
This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. To help save lives, stay at home. Anyone can spread coronavirus. Only leave your home for the following reasons: to shop for basic necessities, to pick up medicine or to provide care to those who need it, to exercise once a day, alone or with members of your household. Only travel to work when you absolutely cannot work from home. If you have to go out for any of these reasons, always stay 2 meters apart. Do not meet others outside your household, even friends and family. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
You're listening to a special edition of the Sherborne Podcast. Around 1 million, especially vulnerable people across the country, have been told to stay in their homes for 3 months. In Sherborne, a number of the town's independent businesses have got together to provide help and support to people who are at most risk from the virus and finding the new reality difficult. One of the organisers of the Sherborne Viral Kindness Group is Jules Bradburn, who's been telling me where the idea came from.
I don't really know. We were sat talking on a Sunday afternoon a couple of weeks ago before all of this went crazy, just really discussing how our businesses were going to cope over the next few weeks. So we decided what we'd do is set up an independent delivery service through Sherborne, and then we decided actually perhaps we should do just a little bit more than that. So if somebody wanted their shopping doing, we could help, or if somebody wanted their prescriptions collecting, we could help. So that's how it started, and it just sort of within the first week it exploded. We've got 900 people, I think, on the Facebook page now. Last week we were doing about 60 inquiries a day, and I've asked all of my volunteers to call in today with how many things they've done. And today we've done 178 inquiries.
So how does the scheme work?
So we've got a Facebook page, email, telephone connections. So if anybody who is in isolation or shielding needs shopping doing, then they can either contact the Facebook page or email myself directly. Each street has got its own street coordinator, so that the person is only dealing with one point of contact, and they know that that is the person that's looking after their street. So they can contact them directly, or they can contact us here, and we'll organise shopping, medicine collection, dog walking. We've even organised ant killer and rabbit food today, so there you go.
Is there a limit to the number of people you can help? Can you spread out further?
We are covering most of the Sherborne villages at the moment. We've got over 90 volunteers on our books, and we get more offers on a daily basis, which is just lovely. So in some of the larger places like Milbourne Port, we've actually got a WhatsApp group with about 9 or 10 volunteers on it. The same in Longburton. We've set up individual groups with all of the pharmacies coordinating the deliveries each day. So I think we've still got capacity.
How do you cope with all the admin?
We have a wonderful team of admin volunteers. So we have admin people that help us in the morning, and then we have some more people that do the afternoon shift, and then I just sort of dip in and out and just oversee it all, really. We've got such a wonderful team of volunteers, you wouldn't believe it. It's quite amazing. A lot of our volunteers are teachers that are currently not teaching. We've got retired people, we've got people that are furloughed. So we've got such a range of skills between us. It's quite incredible, really.
What do you think the response to the Sherborne Viral Kindness Scheme says about Sherborne as a town?
I think it just proves what a marvellous community we are. Honestly, I have cried so many times at the generosity of people. We started a little fund because we started a community kitchen last week. We became very aware that some people weren't getting a hot meal every day, and we met more and more elderly people and vulnerable people that weren't capable of providing a meal for themselves. So we started a community kitchen, and it's gone from strength to strength. So we asked for some donations, and I put up that we wanted £5,000 over, I was expecting a period of a month, and we've hit nearly £3,000 in 3 days. So it's just incredible. Everybody wants to help in some way, shape or form. It's just fantastic. We're so lucky to live in a place like Sherborne.
And you're getting quite widely talked about. Are you advising any other groups in other towns about how to do this sort of thing?
Yeah, we have been. We were on BBC News last week. Countryfile have come to talk to us as well, but we've advised lots of schemes on how we've done it. Lots of people had ideas about, people putting things in their window to say that they needed help, and we've tried to dissuade people from doing that, because obviously it flags up who is vulnerable and who isn't. So we've had a really good response. We've taken on some great ideas from some other places as well. It's great. It's really nice swapping ideas and problems with other people. If anybody wants to make any donations, it is GoFundMe Sherborne Community Kitchen. The more funding we get in, the more meals we can make. If there is anybody who needs a daily meal, then we're very, very happy to provide them. So if somebody's worried about a neighbour or a family that's vulnerable, maybe because they're not working, then do let us know and we can get food delivered to them.
Okay, and what's the most unusual request you've had?
I think ant killer. Ant killer, I think, has got to top the list. We had a rabbit food request as well. That was kind of funny, because I just thought rabbits ate dandelion leaves. But I did have a very particular gentleman who wanted me to pick up a particular type of yeast for his bread making, and was most put out when I said I was happy to do some general shopping, but we couldn't do specific items.
You're listening to a special episode of the Sherborne Podcast and how the town's responding to the coronavirus pandemic. Don't be tempted to attack the garden while you're staying at home unless you have a compost bin. The recycling centre is closed and the council's curbside collections of garden waste have been suspended. That's so they can maintain the normal collections of refuse and recycling materials even though their crews are beginning to report in sick. Food waste will continue to be collected weekly with the regular fortnightly cycle for refuse and recycling bins. But Dorset Council says from now on they won't come back and empty mist bins. You'll have to keep the rubbish until the next scheduled collection day. And the council says if you go out during the emergency, take your rubbish and dog waste home with you. They won't be emptying street bins as often as usual. Now, as we've heard, the town's independent businesses are supporting the Sherborne Viral Kindness Group, and they're working together to try and ensure they survive the almost total shutdown. Steve and Jeanette Taylor have had to close the cafe at the Pear Tree.
The restaurant thing came as not a surprise when the government announced that restaurants, hotels, pubs and cafes were going to have to close. I think it was on the cards. Unfortunately, we here employ 18 staff, and the majority of that is tied up with the cafe side of things. Unfortunately, they've all been furloughed. So at the moment, we're running the deli side of the operation just within the family. So that's myself, Jeanette and James, and our sister-in-law Linda, and we are basically taking phone orders for delivery out and about to the Sherborne and immediate area, and we are also doing some doorstep collections from the shop, and yeah, it's like changed our lifestyle.
We've been here 3 years now, because obviously the business has been here for about 25 years.
Yeah, we took the business over, didn't we, in April 2017. So, and we're sort of trying to get our mark a bit more on it, which we're slowly doing.
Have the steps the government taken, will they help you? Business rates? And
the business
rates,
like yes, definitely. The grants, definitely, and also the basically the effect of nationalising wages to a level of 80% will be a massive help. As with all things, and with all things government, it's just the timescales of when all this turns up.
Have you had any advice yet?
At the moment, we hear that the wages side of things is being run by HMRC. HMRC, you have to contact and log in when they have set the portal up to do it. They are saying April, but they're not saying when in April, and the fear is that it's probably going to be late April.
So in the meantime, people have no money?
Yes. So we're scratching around here. We're not taking, we're taking about 10% of what we would normally take in a day, just through scrabbling around and trying to be of a service.
Yeah, we're trying to be a service to all the people that obviously are self-isolating and can't get out, and then again just to try and keep the business going with little bits of money that we take.
And you're part of the group in Sherborne that is now trying to adapt your businesses to offer takeaways and deliveries.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how's that going?
The delivery side of things is very good, but as I said to you, it's kind of that readjustment of routine. You get very much, as we all know and we all do, fixed in a routine of your daily working life, and then all of a sudden it's blowing out the water, so we have to try and adjust to various things that happen, and they seem to happen on a very daily basis, not on a weekly or monthly basis. So the adjustment's been hard, but we are still able to offer a service and hopefully appease a few people's delivery requirements.
Working with others in the town as well, which is quite good, that all the independents can pull together, which is a great thing. You know, we all work together anyway, and this is a time of coming together and making that work even more efficiently.
And how does that work? Do you phone each other up every day?
We've had some leaflets made, basically with all the independent shops that wanted to take part, all the phone numbers, and then we've got some little groups set up.
So what tends to happen, isn't it, is that if say an order is placed with Vineyards or with Oliver's, we text each other, message each other and say, right, we're going to Yeovil, or we're going to Trent, or we're going to Bristol Road. Anybody got anything going that way? And we all pull together and put the concise the orders and send them up.
And are you getting support from the town?
Yes,
Yeah,
we are. Yes.
Yeah, we've had quite a few orders since we've been doing this just a week, 8 days now. So yeah, and overall it's been very good.
Yeah.
You must be worried about how long this is going to last.
Yes, without a doubt.
Unknown, isn't it? That's the thing at the minute. It's day by day, and we are worried about it. Yeah, hence why we're trying to keep things going here.
How long can you keep going?
Who knows? As long as we're fit and healthy, we will keep going. It's tricky times, it's hard times, but nevertheless, the pear tree will keep going as long as it can keep going.
You shouldn't be travelling by train unless you're going to work. South Western Railway started a reduced timetable this week. There's one train every 2 hours between Sherborne and Salisbury, and Sherborne and Exeter in each direction, with an hourly service between Salisbury and London Waterloo. The trains will start later and stop earlier than usual, with the last train connecting through to Exeter leaving London at 9:20. The ticket office at Sherborne is closed and the ticket machines don't take cash. Meanwhile, the government's announced a new 3-year contract for GWR, which will protect services and jobs during the COVID-19 emergency and promises improvements for passengers when things get back to normal. With the likelihood more and more people will succumb to the virus, the emergency services have developed plans to cope with more of their staff reporting sick. Martin Hall is from the Dorset and Wiltshire Fire Service.
We currently have around 10 firefighters within our service off in sickness, and that is for 2 weeks at the moment. Obviously, as the virus progresses, that could increase. Obviously, we do have a lot of our staff are on call, so where they'd normally be at work, they're now working from home, so they're providing us with extra cover. So a lot of our stations are actually have more cover than they've ever had due to the fact that people are now working from home.
Are you having to take any special precautions when you answer calls?
Yes, obviously, due to it being a virus, our staff frontline staff have all had extra training and equipment sent to stations. So that's ranging from the simple things as washing your hands, like we do as members of the public, to disinfecting everything we use. So if we go into the stations and use the computers, we have to disinfect all the computers. Same with for our whole-time members of staff, when they start shift, they disinfect everything to start with. And then before they finish shift, they disinfect everything. And it's exactly the same for our on-call members of staff. The first person in will open the door and then disinfect it. Everyone has to wash their hands before they get dressed, get on the fire appliance. Obviously, once they'd been to the incident and dealt with the incident, they'd come back. Everything would be disinfected, and before they leave, they wash their hands and then go. So it does take us a little bit longer, but we are prepared for that. And as staff get used to it, we become quicker at it.
And of course, social distancing is a bit of a problem for you.
Yes, at the moment we've slowed down our drill nights. So for our on-call firefighters, they would have a drill night once a week where they'd keep up their competencies, do training, things like that. We've taken that online, so everyone can access our secure site from home. They do this, log in, and they can read their policies and procedures, keep themselves up to date, and we're just kind of turning our training a bit more electronic for the moment whilst we deal with the virus.
What can the public do to help you at this time?
The public can help us by staying at home, only going out if it is essential, keeping their travel to a minimum. With this, we've seen a massive rise in the amount of small fires and bonfires we're attending as a service. We believe this is an impact of recycling centres closing and people being at home and finally getting around to doing those jobs that they always said they didn't have time for. So we would advise not to have a controlled burn. Obviously, it is a big drain on our resources. Sending out an appliance to a house because a neighbour thinks it's your house that's on fire, and not just having a small bonfire in the back garden.
And you're working more closely with the other emergency services?
Yes, obviously we work very closely with Dorset Police, Wiltshire Police and South West Ambulance Service. We regularly have online meetings nearly every day. We check in, see how they're doing, how we're doing, how we can best help each other during this outbreak.
And so are you taking on extra responsibilities, extra duties?
Yes, we've obviously worked very closely with our partners. We are currently assisting South Western Ambulance Service with a few tasks. Obviously, that's not front line. We're also assisting local food hubs with delivery of food supplies to the most vulnerable and getting out medication and prescriptions out to those people as well.
For the latest updates on the coronavirus developments locally, listen to our daily Sherborne in 60 Seconds episodes from wherever you get your podcasts, and also each evening on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. You can get the latest news and interviews on BBC Radio Solent's Breakfast Show for Dorset with Steve Harris, and listen to local station Ep.1's special information shows at lunchtime on Tuesdays and Thursdays with Terry Bennett and Sue Hill. Remember, until the restrictions are lifted, you should stay at home, go out only for essential shopping or exercise, and wash your hands as soon as you get home. The Sherborne Podcast is a Red Mike production for Brookmore Media.